Hello and welcome, my fellow Palantiriots. The Q2 earnings for Palantir just commenced. I just got done watching. I got about 2 pages of notes, a ton of highlights that I absolutely need to share with you. Some pretty exciting stuff. So we're going to cover the key points. We're going to cover some financial, a little bit more of the boring stuff, but important stuff, and then some analyst questions, and then you'll have a better idea of what's going on here, and then you don't have to actually watch the entire presentation. You can just listen to the key points. So as of right now, Palantir is up 8.7%, so things are pretty good right now. So let's start with the key points. Key points: strong revenue growth beating expectations. Cash flow growth is strong and growing. The end of the year goal has actually been increased because cash flow in the first half of the year has been so strong, and adjusted earnings per share hit expectations. Now for the highlights. Palantir has new deals with the Army, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard, including a 2-year, $100 million contract with the Army. Palantir has also doubled their contract with the Tiberius program. I've already talked about this on the channel, but that's the program to help track and distribute vaccines. That program has been doubled. That contract has been doubled. The FAA is using Palantir for aircraft certification and operational safety, including trusting them to monitor the 737 Boeing MAX. And that's that airplane, has no affiliation. That's that airplane that had kind of a code issue / pilot error issue, and one or two of them crashed, and the entire fleet was grounded. Now they're getting back, and Palantir is helping to monitor that. And remember, Palantir has their Skywise service, so they're already deep in the Air Force industry with Airbus. Now for some financials. Q2 year-over-year revenue growth of 49%. That is huge. That's amazing. $376 million in revenue in Q2, beating estimates of $352 million. $925 million in contracts booked in Q2. Now this one, I'm personally taking it a little bit with a grain of salt, because that is a ton of money. That's future value of contracts booked. So that's contracts booked in Q2 that have a future total value of $925 million. The reason I'm taking it with a grain of salt is because a portion of that is from their SPAC investments, and not all of these SPACs are going to pan out. So a portion of that, at least, I think, just doesn't need as much weight. Like a contract with John Deere, which is one of their new contracts, should have more weight than a contract with a SPAC who's pre-revenue, in my opinion. Free cash flow of $200 million, adjusted operating margin of 31%. Contract value booked actually increased 175% from last year, but again, just figure in the SPAC investments there. 32% increase in commercial customers, so there was a lot going on with commercial customers, and analysts were impressed. They were like, wow, we did not expect this. This has been a complaint in the past that, this is just a government company. They're just not figuring out the commercial side, and it seems like they're starting to figure that out. We have a little bit more on that later. 66% increase in government revenue year over year, so a huge increase in government spending as well, which honestly, I think that's great. I think getting these huge government contracts are great because governments are slow moving. If something's working for them, I think they're going to continue using. Yes, there's a bidding process, but if they're used to a system, I don't know. I think once Palantir has their fingers around someone, they just keep Palantir, and that says a lot to me. I know I've said it a million times, but that customer retention means a lot to me. Very heartfelt. 90% commercial revenue growth year over year. So that was another one of those stats that kind of blew the analysts away, like, wow, okay, they're getting serious about this commercial game. Part of this is due because their marketing doubled in Q2 to help build out their brand. Now, I'm glad to see this because there has been many complaints, myself included, I've done a video on this, that their marketing, their storytelling needs some work. They actually also updated their website. It looks really clean, and that might be a little bit of their marketing end to help be a little maybe more user-friendly, user-facing. But I hope over time they get someone in their marketing department who's able to tell a story about what they do, because there's still so many people who just say, I don't know what Palantir does. And Palantir, they don't handle it very well. They basically like, well, our customers who are happy know what we do. It's not our fault that you don't know what we do. And to be honest, it's hard to understand what exactly they do. I've had to do a lot of research and look up use cases and things like that before I was finally, oh, okay, I understand I don't know. I still think that they could do a better job of it. I'm happy to see that their marketing spend is increased and they're getting more people in who may be better at communicating what exactly they do. They currently are completely debt-free, which is huge, and they have $2.3 billion in cash. I talked about this last week. I think that this is a massive opportunity for them to grow much more than their 30% long-term growth rate through 2025 because they just have so much cash there. If they can deploy this in strategic ways, I mean, the sky is the limit there. $2.3 billion in cash. They have enough cash to last them 9.5 years at their current spending. Crazy, absolutely crazy. Their Q3 revenue goal is $385 million, which seems doable to me, and $300 million in cash flow through the end of the year. So this guidance was updated. It was $150 million, and now they bumped it up to $300 million. We absolutely love seeing that. Revenue growth, 30% annually through 2025 is still the goal. So $5 billion in revenue in 2025 is still the goal, and that seems to be doable on this current trajectory. Palantir's goal is to be the operating system for enterprise. Now, this was kind of cool when they were talking about this, and they basically said, we know in the past that Palantirians, the big guys at Palantir, they've said they want to be the most important software company in the world. And now they've kind of transitioned this a little bit to we want to be the operating system for enterprise. They want enterprise to connect with Palantir and Palantir just to be integral in all of these businesses. And they're really focusing this on day zero businesses from the startup building on Palantir. And that way it's like, you can't leave Palantir. Everything you know is built on Palantir. Something interesting, their average revenue per customer on the commercial side increased from $8.1 million to $8.8 million quarter over quarter. So about a 10% increase quarter over quarter. And now into the questions. What is the long-term vision with these PIPE investments and these SPACs that we're hearing so much about that are, admittedly high risk, potentially high reward, long-term investments? What's the vision here? And they said that they're investing in their customers that show a lot of promise. They said that they've always invested in their customers, but now they have the funds, the resources, the balance sheet to be able to actually invest in these companies. And they're just picking the ones that seem to have the best founders, the most entrepreneurial spirit, the best odds of success. It's a little bit of a toss-up on how exactly I feel here, because I know that we have Alex Karp, legendary investor in the small kind of startup space. Peter Thiel, of course, legendary investor in this space. So you couldn't really get much better people doing this, but there's always high risk with SPACs. But they believe that it's an amazing opportunity, and they're smarter than I am. So less than 1% of their revenue goes towards this program, and they say it's a very, very long-term strategy. Don't expect it to pan out next quarter or next year. Now, a few of those companies include Cellularity, who is using Foundry to develop cell therapy and help battle cancer. Wejo is a software as a service ecosystem that's using drivers' data. Origin Materials is working on decarbonizing other companies. So there's some huge audacious goals here, and if one of them hits, I think Palantir shareholders will benefit in a huge way, but that's a very long, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Now, when will they have positive earnings per share? Now, this has been a question that's been floating around basically since they've been public. They have a focus on revenue and cash flow was the answer here. And basically that means to me that they're kind of saying it happens when it happens. They're growing very rapidly. Their cash flow is increasing. And, eventually that earnings per share will happen, but they didn't give a date like this will happen next year or anything like that. I think they're hesitating to give any specifics. That way the stock, doesn't tank if that doesn't happen. Next question. This has been a question basically as long as time as well. What's up with the insider selling with Alex Karp? And they basically said that he has scheduled sales each quarter that are selling 10-year-old options. And if he doesn't exercise those, they will disappear. He sold half the shares that he received. And it's important to remember that each one of those sales is a taxable event. So on those options, you have to pay taxes once you receive them. And he has hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes. So he just has to sell some of his shares. Next question, what are the forward-looking micro and macro trends that Palantir are looking for in the future? forward-looking in the future. They're saying that supply chains will never be the same. You can no longer manage a supply chain to be efficient or kind of try to plan for certain events to happen. They basically said the pandemic has flipped this upside down. They said you need a supply chain that can fix things on the fly, and that is what Palantir does. What is the main driver for these increased commercial sales? Why are they so strong? And the biggest thing here is many new hires in their sales force, and that sales force is starting to pan out, starting to get work done. They had 60 additional new hires in Q2 alone. I believe that's more than 100 new sales force hires this year. And in this, they have a few large company deal acquisitions, like with John Deere I mentioned earlier, some utility providers, and they got 20 new commercial customers in Q2. Of those 20 new customers, 7 of those are the strategic partnerships that are the small kind of SPAC investments. So, a portion are other large companies who are more stable, in my opinion. So that's going to do it for the earnings call. A lot of exciting things here. Cash flow is good. Revenue is good. I'm not changing anything with my shares. We are now up 9.2% as of the recording of this. And I think this is great. Overall, I think it is good news for any Palantir holder. And I'm happy with this earnings call. Thanks. Bye.